Deedee Cummings. I am so excited to have you here today to have a chat about your wildly famous Make a Way media company that you have. And more importantly, which I'm so excited to talk to everyone about, is you have published 17 children's books. 17. This is not just like a one and done, I'm going to try, it's my passion, but you have 17. Amazing. So I wanted to share your work with our community because we have a lot of people in our space, Deedee, that are talking about, I want to integrate yoga into stories and I don't know how to publish. I don't know how to do this, all the process. So I'd love to speak to you about that. And also, you're up to something here. I can see by your website, you were introduced to us by a mutual friend within the multicultural kid blog world. Mm-hmm. And you are very passionate about the work. So to get started, first of all, thanks for being here. And I would love you to talk to us about your background. What is your passion? What's your work all about? Tell us everything.
Tell you everything? That's a lot.
Okay, in a short time. But we want to know who you are.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And I don't want to ramble on too much, but my story is kind of a long one. So I'll try to keep it short. But I started off my career more than 2 decades ago as a child protective service worker. And that was just a really hard job. It's a very meaningful job and it's necessary work, but it was a very difficult job. And so I started going to law school at night because I was in family court a lot. And I thought, maybe I could do more if I was a lawyer in family court to help with a lot of the injustice that I saw. And so I started going to law school at night while I was a child protective service worker during the day. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done. But by the time I got finished with law school, I never wanted to step foot in a courtroom again.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had gotten a master's degree earlier than that. And I found out that I could become a therapist. So I passed the bar and I am a lawyer here in my home state where I live, which is Kentucky. But I've never practiced. I didn't want to fight. Lawyers fight a lot in court. I wanted to do more to mend situations where families end up in crisis, and when families have difficulty communicating with each other. I wanted to be on the mending side, not on the fighting side. So after I became a therapist, I was working with children and families, and I also worked a lot with kids in foster care. And these kids were done talking by the time I got to them. They had already told their story to multiple social workers, maybe a teacher, maybe guardians, foster parents, a judge, their own lawyer, because kids who go to court in abuse cases get their own lawyer. And so by the time they got through all that and ended up in therapy, they were done talking. They were done telling their story. So I had to be really creative in how I came up with ways for them to talk to me about all of the things that were going on in their mind, because even though court was over, their problems were far from over. So I started using books with kids in therapy. And when I saw how kids responded to characters who look like them and stories that were similar to what they were going through, I started writing my own stories because there just weren't enough to share. And I was really surprised. I was going into kids' homes where they had absolutely no books. And when I tell people that, some people are not surprised at all, and some people are shocked. But I just assumed all kids had some kind of book. I mean, you get a book when you come home from the hospital in a lot of places. Sometimes you get books at school. You might get books at a fair. But I was working with kids that had no books. So I started bringing books with me and giving them away. And books are very therapeutic, because kids that won't talk to you about what's going on in their own life will talk to you about something in a story. You'll read the book with them and they'll say something like, well, that was stupid. I wouldn't have done that. And then you can say, well, what would you have done? And then that's how you can get into their mindset. So I told you it was a really long story, but
no, that's beautiful. I am just, there's so much there, Deedee, so much there. I love the path. I want to highlight again your path, that you had a mission in your heart, that you knew that what work you want to do was work with families, right?
Yeah.
And then you got your, you worked as a child protector, and then you got your law degree. However, I'm thinking, even though you're not in the judge, in the room, then you're still using that knowledge, right? It's the same as if when we take yoga teacher training, not all of us are become yoga teachers like myself. I wanted to know the depth and the history, and that's helped me in my entire life, so it's, I love how you did that. And there's another, I have to introduce you to another colleague of ours who's done very similar. She was working with in law, and then has been working with families. So I love how you say the distinction of mending versus fighting, right?
And I do the same things as a therapist that I would do as a lawyer. The principles are very much the same. Exactly. I still advocate for people. I still help people. I still solve very complex problems. There are so many things that are in common between the field of a law profession and the mental health profession. So the leap really wasn't that large for me. Right. But the shift in the way that I serve people was huge.
Yes. And just the knowledge behind you, right? You've got so much behind you. So you're a therapist that's unique, right? You do have a deeper understanding of how the court systems, because you understand who's in front of you and what they may have gone through, That's super important work. And I love the fact that you talk about books being a therapeutic. I mean, my heart grows 3 times too big. I'm obsessed with children's books. So that just, it lands for me. And I so appreciate you saying that. It doesn't matter. Books, the stories cross, they don't discriminate, right? They cross all cultures, all people, all ages, but to have that experience, to be able to connect on a deeper level, and to have a little bit of detachment in a way, right? So that they can see themselves in the characters, but they don't have to talk about them. I know that my daughter she doesn't connect with talking therapy, but if it's something that's a little bit further away, she's able to then discuss it about someone else, right? And so I think that's what your stories are. And let's talk about your stories. I've heard of the Kayla, a modern day princess. My friend told me about that, but tell us more about the books that you've been publishing.
Well, all of my books in the beginning were all focused on coping skills and how to get through this crazy life, because that's, the work I was doing with kids. And they still are focused on coping skills, but the stories have evolved a little bit more. So in the beginning, I was writing books like I wrote My Trip to the Beach, which is all about mindfulness and how you can go to the beach anytime you want to in your mind. And so it talks about, feeling your toes in the sand, even though, you're not in the beach. And it's a great way to teach kids to cool down, focus on something else until they can put the problem in front of them in a little bit better perspective. So that's what all my books were about in the beginning, those kinds of topics. And then I feel like I kind of had this bridge where there was just so much political discourse, and I was really getting frustrated with it felt like there was conflict everywhere. And I was watching the news. I turned off the TV. I sat on the edge of my bed and I just was staring out the window, and I was very frustrated at why can't we talk to each other? We spend all the time in schools telling kids not to name call and not to tease and not to tattletale, all of these things that we tell kids not to do. And then we're watching all of these adults do it every day. And so these simple words came to me in this book called This is the Earth. And this actually won a first place Purple Dragonfly Award for in conflict, because I feel like we are not teaching children the language of peace. And so this is the beginning of talking to children about how to be active listeners and not to be threatened by someone's story. So it even talks in here about respecting someone's brain, their mindset, how they feel, and that this part about you show me your concerns are no threat to me. So I use this image of this bird having this 6-pack ring around its neck from, from soda cans. And the reason I use that image is because in our culture, we tend to be a little bit overreactive, and we have a very black and white thinking. And so if you're a huge soda fan, like you drink 6 Pepsis a day, and I am a person who advocates on behalf of beach animals and says, turtles and fish and seagulls are getting caught up in these 6-pack rings. We need to do something about that. A person who's a huge soda pop advocate will say, well, you're not taking my sodas away.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to drink my soda. This is America. I have a right to drink my sodas. And what I'm trying to show children at a young age, so hopefully they'll grow up and have a different mindset about how to problem solve, is there is a place in the middle where we can meet. I never said that you had to give up your Coca-Cola or your Pepsi. I never said that. What I said was we need to do something about this because turtles and birds are suffering because we have these 6-pack rings. And so, the outcome is we educate each other. You can still have your sodas, but instead of throwing the 6-pack ring in the garbage, cut it up or buy the paper, the cardboard box of sodas instead of buying the 6-pack ring. But we're in a place right now where we can't hear that. If I point at a problem and say, I want to do something about it, there's someone else on the other side who says, you're not going to touch this. And we have to do a better job of listening to each other before we react and respond.
Oh, this is amazing. And they're on so many levels, right? It's not just for the children, but also, our children are involved in politics these days, more so than I remember growing up, right? But they hear about it and they hear, like you said, they hear the adults talking about it.
Yes.
And there's this, and you talked about this just distorted thinking about this all or nothing, but it's having us as adults also consider this idea of, instead of polarizing, how do we meet in the middle? How do we create these balances? And we can do that by modeling for children, right? And helping them. So it's not just in their conflicts, but you're planting life seeds, right? Like this is transformational, how they can even communicate in the world. Now imagine, I'm sure you have this all the time where you're working with the families that you're working with. Like imagine if we could communicate better, as you say. And what a beautiful way through your stories. Amazing. I feel like I want to run to the nearest top of the mountain and scream out loud, like, why does not everyone have Deedee Cummings books? Like, this is amazing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And, the funny thing about being an author, and we can maybe talk about this more when we get to that part, is that I started off writing these books to help other people, but they actually really help me. So
yes, right, exactly.
They remind me of what I need to work on too.
Yes. Well, I think this is the thing, right? As fellow authors, here we are speaking, right? So you have to have a passion, you have to have a mission. The stories, like us teacher authors, that we have these layers, right? So it's not just the words on the page, but there's a message that we want to children and families and teachers to get through. So tell us a little bit more about this self-publishing. So I'm clear on your message, which is phenomenal. Now, tell us about that journey of you. I think you're independently published. Is that right?
Yes, I published through my company called Makeaway Media.
Okay, so tell us what's your process? How did you choose where to publish through? How did you find your illustrator? Tell us the process of self-publishing?
Self-publishing is something that we probably just have to have just a talk just about that, because there are a lot of factors that go into publishing, period. And then once you decide whether you want to take what's known as the traditional route of publishing, or if you want to publish your own books, which is more common now than ever. And the only reason I decided to go the self-publishing route, which is a very long and winding road, but so can traditional publishing be as well. The only reason I decided to go the self-publishing route is because I'd worked very hard throughout my entire career. I'd already been working 20 years by that point. I was in my 40s before I published my first book. And by the time I decided I wanted to publish my first book, I did some research on the traditional publishing route, and I just didn't want to play this game of writing up a synopsis of my book, doing all this research. I even bought this book one time that was like this thick, that has, I don't know, all of the agents in America in it, maybe all of the publishing houses, and then there's a list of the current agents and what kind of books they publish and what their interest is, and it's just such a maze. And the best way to traditionally publish is to already know someone who's publishing in the genre that you want to publish in, and hopefully they can plant a seed in their agent's ear. Hey, I have a friend who wants to write similar books to me. But how often is that going to happen, especially if you don't live in New York or Chicago, someplace that's like a hub of publishing? That's very rarely going to happen. So I bought the book and I was doing all the research, and I just thought, this is crazy. By the time I figure out an agent that I want to write to, then I have to write to them and pitch my idea to them. And then I have to wait 3 months. You'll see in these Facebook groups all the time where authors are talking to each other, or people who want to be authors are talking to each other. You'll see all the time these posts that say, I wrote to this person 3 months ago. How long should I wait before I nudge them? Like,
right.
And then there's all this protocol, like you should only write to one person at a time. And, there's just all this protocol. Like, if you have an idea, apparently agents don't like if you send that idea to 10 people at one time, hoping that one of them responds. So, don't take this advice literally, because there are lots of different ways you can get your pitch out there. But in some instances, you will only send one pitch to one agent at a time. Then you have to wait to see if they respond. And after 3 months, they might respond and say thanks, but no thanks. They might never respond. They might respond and say, I like your pitch, but I want to see what else you have. So then you send them 3 more pitches and wait another month, 2 months, 3 months. I was in my 40s and I just didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I found out how to self-publish. People ask me all the time, is it hard to self-publish? It's not hard, but it's not easy either. It takes some dedication. It takes some work. And I would encourage anyone who wants to self-publish to really become an expert on self-publishing. Don't just publish one book, in the easiest way possible. Hold on to that idea for that book until you feel really confident about what you're doing in self-publishing. Because I see so many people with good ideas who publish a book and then it just doesn't turn out the way that they had envisioned. And from my experience, when that happens the most is when people have quickly pushed a button on self-publishing without, really looking around and deciding what they want. There are so many opportunities for self-publishing. There are more now than ever.
Right.
And so that's a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing when you have not really taken the time. I treat my books like children. And I always tell people I wouldn't just drop my child off at any daycare without having done the research on the daycare. And you should treat your books, if you self-publish, the same way.
I love that. So once you've decided to do the self-publishing route, I love that analogy of looking after it, right? So you chose you're going to do that route. And then how did you find your illustrator, and did you have an editor? How did you kind of put the book together after that?
I've never really had an editor, but I don't recommend that. I recommend that you do get an editor. But luckily, another thing that I've done, which I haven't really talked about yet, in this whole process, is I founded the Louisville Book Festival because a very, very long story about how the Louisville Book Festival was found, but Louisville is very segregated. In fact, it's the 4th most segregated city in the country. And Louisville has a clear book desert. Louisville's like a big, gigantic circle. There's a highway that runs down the middle of that circle, and Louisville is segregated based on that highway. And we're not alone. There are many cities like that. that are designed to be segregated, highways that were built a long, long time ago that still define city boundaries. And so on the left side of this highway in Louisville, there are absolutely no bookstores. And on the right side, there are plentiful bookstores. They're everywhere, like coffee shops. And so I founded the Louisville Book Festival to call attention to that, to highlight that, how literacy has truly been withheld from certain communities where we live. The Louisville Book Festival's motto is that we believe literacy is a human right. And so luckily I am surrounded by book experts because of that.
Wow.
So I have not really had to hire a formal editor. Now I'm writing my first book for adults, and because that's 80,000 words, not 1,000 words, there's a big difference between a novel and a picture book. And that's why I don't want anyone to hear my words and say, well, Deedee didn't have an editor. I'm now writing an 80,000 word book, and I did hire an editor. That's the difference. But my other books are 1,000 words. And so people that I've come into contact with through the Louisville Book Festival, I've asked them, hey, will you give me feedback on these books? And so I have been able to get my books edited that way. But absolutely, I would say, especially people who apply, authors who apply to the Louisville Book Festival, the number one reason by far that people's books get rejected from the book festival is that they have not been professionally edited. Because there are so many people who think, well, I speak well, I write well, so I can publish my own book. But it just doesn't work like that. I think I speak very well too, but I don't always write, in the MLA format,
Yeah. Well, it sounds like also too, you're using the books with children, right? And so you're getting feedback from them as you're sharing these stories. And what better words? I mean, we know this as children's book authors, that the words on the page have to work for the person telling the story, but also has to land for the audience, right? So it's nuanced. It's not directly speaking, the grammar in a way, but it has to work as a story, right?
Definitely. Yeah, 100%. But there's many paths to publishing, many. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is I made this series called Modern Day K. It comes in this beautiful box, which I love. And it's a 5-book series. And the thing that's so cool about this, there are many things that are cool about this, but one thing that's cool about this, so this is the series. And this is actually probably one of my favorite covers because I love how her little tutu is being formed by butterflies.
Oh,
yeah. But a really cool thing about this series is that I did a Kickstarter to pay for it. So I held a Kickstarter and I raised over $40,000 to publish on Kickstarter to publish these 5 books. So you'd ask me about how I found my illustrator, and I've just been very fortunate with that. It is very difficult to find an illustrator, and I love your books. I saw your books and I thought they looked great because one of the things that I'm not crazy about in the self-publishing world that's happening with children's books is people are using a lot of digital art, which digital art can be great, but we've all seen bad examples of digital art. And I think it's going to get worse, with AI. There are just some people, for some reason, that don't have an eye for truly illustrated children's books. Like, these images, this illustrator, Charlene Mosley, I found my illustrators different ways, but Charlene Mosley and I connected on on Twitter. Gosh, I don't even know how long ago. Years ago. I just found her on Twitter. Found her because another author tweeted about a book that he was releasing, and she was the illustrator. And I was just fortunate enough to be on. I'll think about that all the time. What if I had not been on Twitter that day?
Right.
Would I have found Charlene? But her images are just, oh my gosh. Charlene Mosley. She's in California. We worked together for 3 or 4 years before we ever even met. And I just can't speak highly enough about her. The images that she creates are
Wow.
just magical. And she gets my vision. She's so easy to work with. She truly tells a story with her art. And I think for me, that's why I'm not crazy about digital illustrations, because I feel like when people use those sometimes, those digital illustrations, I was looking for an image in the Kayla series that I really, really love. But sometimes those digital images lack the storytelling
Yeah. Right. Right.
part. I mean, look at this. This is just,
Oh,
these are just
oh
images with
my
like
gosh.
Disney
Everything.
level. This is like Disney level illustration, you know? And
Yeah.
those are, and beyond that, the fact to see, you know, to see a Black woman dressed as a queen or a princess is just not something that we see a lot. I went my whole life, my entire life, until I was probably, I don't know, 40, without ever seeing a Black Disney princess, when there were plenty of princesses of other backgrounds, but not a single one who looked like me. So it's important, you know, and it's important for children of color to not just see, okay, here's one,
Yeah.
but to see more images like that. And so I'm very thankful for Charlene Mosley. She's the illustrator I use most now. And she also helped me make an activity book that goes along with the Kayla series. So this is all Black and white, but it's so much fun. It has coloring pages, and
Wow.
it has all kinds of activities to do. And we always talk about dreams and goal planning. We always talk about, you know, thinking about the world around you. And here's some words on how to be a better human. Which, you know, in school, we talk with children a lot about how to interpret the world around them through reading, through mathematics, through science. And I don't, you know, put this on school. Sometimes you'll see people say, well, they need to teach social skills in school. School can't teach everything.
Yeah.
So that's where it comes, you know, up to us to find literature like this and talk with children about social skills and about how to be a better human being.
Well, you know, it's the kind of thing where story time is a natural part of an early childhood experience, right?
Yes.
So in the
Yes.
classrooms, we're already having story time. So why not have one of your books, right? That is also weaving in social emotional learning and, as you say, how to be a better human,
Yeah.
mindfulness. There's so much to include there where it's part of story time, because story time, generally speaking, is a time for the teacher, you know, usually the children are sitting on the carpet, or, you know, there's that relatedness. The children they know how to sit, how to behave, how to listen, generally speaking, right? But there's already, you're dropping into something that they're familiar with, and they're familiar with the style of a book, the pictures, that. So then what you're trying to get through there is so much easier and meaningful and relevant for them, right? To digest these topics. It's not something that's like, I'm going to take you to this unfamiliar space with these unfamiliar tools that I like. It's all too much. It's too stimulating. But what you're doing is you're offering teachers a really easy way to integrate these topics into their classrooms without adding more to their plate, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So what would you say then, to, if you were talking to, you know, a room full of people who would like to publish a children's books, and here you're sitting here with 17, what would you say sort of are your 3 top tips for self-publishing a children's book?
Well, the first tip is to do it.
Right.
Because I meet so many people who spend years, decades, myself included. I think I seriously wanted to write from the age of 30 to 40 and didn't. And, you know, I was raising children and I was working more than one job. And there were lots of reasons why I didn't. But the biggest reason was fear.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of times I meet people who say, well, I have an idea for a book, but there's already 10 books like that, but not written by you. You know, there can be 1,000 books about a princess, but you never know which princess will resonate with which child. So just because there's 1,000 books about a princess doesn't mean all of the stories have been told.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like, if you picture it to kind of like equate it to love stories. What if we as a culture said, we have 10 movies about love stories and that's enough? We would have never gotten The Notebook or Pretty Woman or all those kinds of stories that we go crazy about. We would have thought, well, all the love stories that need to be told have been told, and some of our favorite movies would have never been made. So keep that in mind when you want to tell a story. Don't get in your head about whether it's good enough or not. Tell your story. If it's a story that's on your heart, it's there for a reason. And I believe it's there because it's calling out to be told. It's your destiny. So that's the number one thing, is there are many stories that die with people because they get in their head about whether they're a good story or not. The second thing is to surround yourself with other people. And I know a lot of us are introverted or, socially shy, but social media does a lot to, I'm not a big fan of social media, but social media has, it's really truly how we connected, because I connected with Read Your World, which connected me with Leanna, which connected me to you.
Right. Right.
And I now talk to people about books in Germany and Australia. And if it weren't for social media, I never would have connected with those people. So join groups. You don't always have to be completely interactive, but like on Facebook, I don't always talk in a lot of these author groups, but I see what they're talking about and I think, I never thought about that. That's one way you can find illustrators. It's how you can find good printers. It's how you can decide if you want to self-publish or try to take the traditional route. But surround yourself with people, and the more you immerse yourself in those kind of groups, like we also have a SWBCI group. I hope I said those letters right.
Yes,
A
right.
society of illustrators, and if when they actually meet in person, they meet here at the Barnes and Noble in Louisville in person. So I know they do that all over the country. So you can also find lots of in-person, look for literary groups in your area. And the more you surround yourself with those groups, the more, lift your wings will get, the more air you'll get under your wings, and you'll be able to take off a little bit easier because you won't feel so alone. And the third thing is to treat a book like your craft. Don't just publish something. I don't want to name any platforms because I don't want to disparage anything, but don't just easily hit the publish button just because you can. If you have a story, it's like the analogy I used about, dropping a child off at a daycare. Really take time to spend with the story and make sure it's what you want to say. Show it to other people. Don't be afraid to show it to other people. Know who to show it to. Don't show your stories to people who are going to be negative, because then they're going to get in your head and you might not follow through with your dream or your vision. But show your story to other people, because there's nothing wrong with people giving you ideas for your story. It's still your story. And make sure that you really are communicating the message that you really wanted to communicate. Show it. If you're writing children's books, show your story to kids. I have people all the time. I ask people, will you read these? Well, I don't even have the pictures yet. And I say, well, you read these words to your child and tell me what your child thinks these words mean.
Right. Right.
But surround yourself with people and treat your book like your craft. I'm sitting here now in the Louisville Book Festival conference room, and I'm surrounded by books. I'll show you really quickly what that looks like. So we're accepting submissions right now, and all the pieces of paper you see are applications. So we're accepting all of these books right now that people are sending in to us with their applications. And it's heartbreaking, really, to see that some people have a dream and they just haven't sought any feedback at all about, what their cover looked like, or even if the words on the book can be read. Believe it or not, that's a very common thing for people to have, like back matter material that you can't read
Mm,
because they didn't talk to anybody about, does the book cover design complement these words? Just things like that.
right, right.
You know, when you finally hit publish, you want to make sure that you have um, have made the book that your heart was calling you to make, and you can't. And it's hard to do that alone.
Right. You bring such a great perspective, Deedee, bringing up so many good points here about that you're seeing a whole bunch of self-published books, right?
Yeah,
That's such an interesting point of view that you're seeing it. So you can see clearly after you see repeat, see more and more and more, you're going to start to notice, which ones are the ones that just shine instantly, right? That the
yeah,
author is taking a lot of time and effort, as you say, not it's their craft, it's their passion, but also have they followed what's expected in a picture book, for example? Does it have all the layout that's expected? Because
right.
the reality is there's a certain way that it's traditionally put together that people are expecting as teachers and families. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's a really interesting perspective. So you've shared so much. I so appreciate this, Dee. What do you have any other advice that you would say to folks who are like, dreaming and thinking and dying to publish, but they just don't really know where to start and they don't know how to get the stories out in the world? Like the fact that you said you had a Kickstarter for 40,000. I mean, I'm like, wow, how did you do that? But any other last minute sort of advice you'd give for folks who are
Well,
looking to?
I call myself a professional dreamer.
Yeah.
Um, and that is because somewhere along the line, I made up my mind that I only had one life. And I know you always hear people say that. So it loses its punch, it loses its power when you hear people say it a lot. You only have one life. You only have one life. You can kind of hear like your grandma's voice in your head saying, you only have one life. But that's so powerful. You only have one opportunity to be here. And I don't want to leave without having done everything that my heart calls me to do. I'm
Mm,
going to try it, whether it's successful, whether anybody else knows about it. I'm not going to say I don't care. Of course, it'd be great if everybody knew about my work, which is a type of success. But the real success is in blocking out naysayers and following your heart and your vision. That's the real
mm,
success.
yeah.
Is if something keeps talking to you and keeps saying you should write a book, you should write a book, or you should put together a book festival, or whatever it is that is
Mm,
calling to you, you really need to spend some time with that. And if you don't know where to start, all you got to do is get a notebook and a
mm,
pen and just start writing down your ideas. What is this voice that keeps talking to you? And where do you think that is trying to take you? And what would it do for your life and your spirit and those around you if you were able to seriously get to work on that dream? Just start with a
mm,
notebook and a pen. Get a really nice pen or a really nice pencil that you really like to write with, and just start, keep it by your bed, carry it with you, and just start jotting down ideas and why it's important for you to make sure that this happens. One last thing on that subject, I have a huge dream. It's the first dream I've ever had that might not happen, and I've never said that about anything else. And obviously, I'm a gigantic dreamer. If I went to law school at night and was a social worker during the day, if I had the nerve to do a Kickstarter, which is not easy. If, I made my own boxes and made a whole series of books and activity books to go along with them, obviously I have gigantic dreams. But I never had a dream that I thought, this might not happen. My first dream where I thought this might not happen is that I would really love to tell this story about this feisty little brown dancer who never let anything get in her way on Broadway. It's my daughter. The Kayla series, I neglected to say, is inspired by my own daughter, Kayla Pecchioni, who is on Broadway. She's on Broadway right now in The Great Gatsby. And I would like to tell her story, not so much just as a tribute to her. It's not really about me or her. It's about all the little girls in the world who were told that they didn't fit a certain shape or they didn't look the way that they needed to. Um,
mm,
it's a story about following your dreams. And so my own daughter said to me, just trying to protect my heart and caring about me, she said, Mom, I don't want you to be disappointed if this Broadway thing doesn't happen, because she recognizes how big it is too.
Mm.
And I said, I appreciate you telling me that. Thank you for being worried about my heart. I said, but I won't be disappointed if it doesn't happen. I'll be disappointed if I never try.
Mm.
And that's what you have to hold on to when you have a dream. You have to try.
Goodness, Deedee, my heart is grown 4 times larger. I'm like, I'm so incredibly inspired. I just want to go run off and go make notes and think about what, sit and listen. And I mean, oh,
Thank you.
what a treat. I am so glad we had this conversation. I'll never forget it, honestly. And I cannot wait to share with our community. You are a special, incredible human being.
Thank you
And
so
I
much.
just think if there was more people like you in the world, Deedee, I can't even imagine what that world might be like. So thank you for spreading you're shining your light and spreading your love and sharing your passion. So how do we find you? How do people connect with you? How do they find your incredible books? And how do they learn more about Make Away Media?
I am on Facebook and Instagram. You can follow me under Deedee Cummings just to see about my life and what I do, and the people that are in my life who are often the people I talk about in some of my work. But I also have websites under deedeecummings.com and makeawaymedia.com. I also do help other people follow their dreams. And that website is makeawaymindset.com, because I think it's very important to develop your mindset in order to be able to follow dreams. And the reason I call myself a professional dreamer is because I have turned each one of these dreams into my life, my jobs. It has become my job to live out my dreams. Yeah. So people can find me that way. We also have a really cool club for kids that's completely free called the K Club. You can go on the Make Away Media website and you'll see the K Club tab, and you can sign up there, and we send free resources every single month on how to talk to kids about coping skills, and their resources that children can use alone or families can use together. And Make Away Media has been doing all this now for 10 years, which is quite a long time. A lot of businesses don't make it 10 years, and Make Away Media runs solely on my heart. So that's why I think it's made it 10 years, and we're having a big celebration. It's kind of like a conference for families, but I don't want people to think it's going to be a boring conference, and you're going to be there.
Yeah, can't wait.
It's not like a boring conference. It's like a party. But I haven't really seen something on Zoom. I've seen lots of stuff for parents, and I've seen lots of stuff for kids. This is for the whole family to come to. And we'll learn some yoga poses thanks to you, and we'll dance, and we'll hear about some great books, and you'll hear about dreams and stories. And I'm so excited. I just can't wait for that. And that's on July 20th from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You don't have to stay on the whole 2 hours. You can come in and come out and join the parts that you want. If you just want to learn some yoga poses, you can just pop on to learn about the yoga poses with you and your children. It's going to be a really fun time. And I honestly can't think of a better way to celebrate 10 years of meeting people and making friends and connections and talking about diverse books. It's going to be a great day.
Oh my goodness, Deedee. Thank you so much. I feel like I could talk all afternoon with you. I cannot wait for your big event. I'm so proud of you and the community that you've put together, the work you've done. So keep on shining on, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you for your time, my dear.
Thank you. And thank you for being a part of it.
Thank you.